It's the Progress Pod, a production of the Franklin County Coalition for Progress. I'm Pete Mazzoni with Jeremy Cate, and before we get started, we'd like to take just a minute to talk about what it is we're doing here with this podcast. Our goal at the Progress Pod is to provide insightful, thoughtful, and frank conversation, whether it be with community leaders or our friends and neighbors. Chambersburg has a diversity ripe to explore, and we aim to do just that. In addition, we plan to bring you local news and culture, whether it's dispatches from Chambersburg Borough Council, a look at what's going on at our local institutions of higher education, or hearing from a local artist. And while we're called the Progress Pod, and we're a production of the Franklin County Coalition for Progress, on this show we aim to reclaim words from being pejorative political labels. We offer them as they are defined by Merriam-Webster. Progress, to move forward or onward, to continue toward completion or to improve, to advance to a higher state. Liberal, one who advocates greater freedom of thought or action. Also, you could say we're a pretty bare-bones operation here right now, but with your help, we can grow. Send us your feedback and ideas at progresspod@gmail.com. And with that, on to today's show. With us today, we have the founding board members of the Franklin County Coalition for Progress, and I'd like to start here to my left. If you could introduce yourselves, be sure to speak into the mic.
Hey everyone, this is Melissa Deacon.
I'm Natasha Gossel.
This is Brenda Hefner.
And Noelle Purdy.
All right, and I want to thank you all for being here with us today. Let's get into it. What was the motivation? We can start with you, Noelle. I mean, we woke up the day after the election, and we all suffered the same head trauma. But you and your group were motivated. So talk about your experiences and what got you going.
Well, I won't deny that I was horrified, and I was in the fetal position day after the election, and I was crying. And my daughter came up to me and said, "Moms don't cry." And I said, "Yes, they do." And I couldn't go to work that day. I know it sounds pretty bad, but it is true. And so for a couple of weeks, I went off Facebook, and I was trying to shut out the noise and try to make sense of everything. And then I went back on Facebook, and I saw popping up in my feed some inspiration, and I saw the Women's March, some folks who are organizing the Women's March. And at first I was a little cautious because I was like, I don't know if this is a thing, if this is going to be real. But I saw it gaining momentum, and I thought, I need to go. So I went to the Women's March with my daughter and my sister and some other folks from the community. And I knew, like, the ladies around this table, a few of them were going to the Women's March as well. So when I got back into town, I was chatting it up with some of the other folks that had gone, and they said, we have to organize a meeting. We have to do something, right? And we didn't know what it was going to be. So we just started organizing and having meetings and bringing other people into the fold, and that's how it started.
What about you, Brenda?
Yeah.
How did it start for you?
Kind of similar. I had been, of course, really in tune to the presidential campaign. Had some strong feelings. I did not like. I want to just go on record as saying I am a Christ follower. I've stopped using the word label Christian. I feel that's been co-opted from me a bit. So.
Co-opted by whom?
Well, just a lot of folks who are speaking a different political line. It boils down to, for me, how we treat people, how we speak of people.
Right.
And for me, it's the marginalized people.
Right.
So,
Okay.
and I saw contrary speech or heard contrary speech. And so after the election, I was still on Facebook. I didn't go off, and I started to hear about the Women's March, and I just made a personal decision. I was going to go and understand this. I would just as soon live in the jungle for the winter months. I hate being cold, and I was going to commit to going down in a potentially, single digit kind of day to see what this was all about and to get some encouragement. So I made that decision on my own. I didn't know at that point that these ladies would also be there. I didn't bump into you, by the way, but until later. So that's kind of where it started with me. And we all came back, I think, motivated. I don't want to speak for you, Natasha, motivated to continue action in some way here in our local community. So.
Okay, thank you. Natasha, how about you?
I think that it's similar to Brenda and Noelle. I had that same familiar experience, that it was kind of like, I'll go on. I'm an independent, so I wasn't sure about where this election was going to go, but I was following it closely, and I thought there's no way that this is going to happen. Really, I was kind of indifferent about it. I didn't watch the polls that night. I started as they came in, and I thought, I'm going to bed. And the next morning I woke up and I thought, oh my. So fast forward a couple months later, for this similar personal reasons, I decided to engage and go to the Women's March. And I realized that, that's all we had at that moment. That day, literally millions of women across every continent came together, not just women, but men and children and advocates came together and said, we're not sure what this is and how we feel about this, but we know something's off here. And luckily, we live in a wonderful country that gives us a right to speak our voice. So we went down, and I went with a group of folks and came back and felt like this movement needed to continue at a local level. And, that's how the coalition was born. It was born out of a few friends with a similar experience, sitting down from all different walks of life and different political parties even, and having a conversation about how can we keep this momentum moving? How can we make sure that we utilize our voices in the best way that we can? So
Great. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you. Melissa, how about you? Tell us your story.
Yeah, mine's a little bit different. So this election was the first one for me that I felt like I got politically engaged. Now, I have voted in the past, but for my adult life, I had very little faith in politics being the sector of society that was going to bring change, particularly social change, social justice change to our nation. So a lot of what I have done as an adult was kind of grassroots movements. Like Brenda, I am follower of Christ. So yes, the word Christian has been co-opted. But my thought was, we need to learn how to love our neighbor, love other people, following the principles that I believe will bring change in a positive way in this world. And so I really didn't have a lot of faith in politics. So this election really was one that was like coming out of a sleepwalk politically. And I felt very uneducated and uninformed, and I still feel like I'm playing catch up. So, this kind of was a turn for me in terms of my interest in politics and how it does play a key role in bringing social justice change. So I did not go to the Women's March, was not able to go, but had attended a local meeting that was some people trying to organize around bringing, some action politically, locally. And I think just because of the climate, people, those in leadership that did, I think weren't prepared for who all was going to show up. And the meeting, just for different factors, just felt a little chaotic. And people were still raw and
crying. So if I could just interrupt just for a quick sec. So for anyone who didn't attend, there was you held a meeting.
I did not.
Are you talking about that meeting that was at Wilson?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. I apologize.
That's okay. It was just people, getting together and trying to develop maybe a local chapter or just some movement. But again, different reasons. It just was very raw. It felt kind of chaotic. People left upset, and just there was a lack of organization. So I kind of came into the picture like, I don't want to see what I just saw happen again. Right. If we're going to bring change to our community and gather and collaborate to do that, we need to be organized. We need to be prepared for who might come. We need to be prepared for all the raw emotions that might show up at the table. And so I just kind of reached out to her like, hey, can I give you some tips on what I just experienced and maybe what would help for you as a leader or whoever's leading what you're doing here. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I got involved.
All right, fantastic. So let's talk about the coalition itself. Do you have kind of a mission statement?
Yeah. So it's evolved over the year, but it's had a common theme, right? And so our mission statement is to advance social justice and equality for all residents in Franklin County.
And how did you all get in touch? Was it all via social media? Or did you know each other previously? How did this work out? How did this coalesce?
Yeah.
Well, I can speak. I've known Noelle for about 10 years, and we've worked together with the Chamber Foundation. So, and we've inaugurated programs for that organization. So Noelle reached out. She knew I'd been to the Women's March, and so she was a reach out to me.
And I knew she had strategic planning skills.
Helpful.
And
to avoid the situation you ran into, Melissa.
Exactly. I mean, we were pretty intentional about the folks that we brought together to our steering committee because kind of knowing and having experience with community organizing, it's really important to pick people with certain skill sets.
Right.
So yeah.
So let's talk about that first gathering at Wilson. How did that come about, and what were your feelings? I was there, and it was an interesting moment in my adult life, to say the least. I felt like there were a lot of adults that were kind of wandering around in a quasi-zombie state. So,
this is Jeremy, by the way. But how many people showed up for that meeting?
We had attendance just over 100, which I think was pretty impressive given that we were very careful not to advertise. Our goal of that first meeting was simply to provide kind of a counter to what Melissa had said. It was a community meeting, and the meeting that she had attended was hosted by a different group, and we knew that we wanted to kind of offer something similar, but without maybe some of the chaos. We were looking to just give a place for citizens that had concerns to meet and discuss openly and calmly those concerns. So,
and real quick, I think the first meeting came about within the first month of setting up that Facebook page. Within a week of setting up that Facebook page, we had over 400 people who were joined the page. So we knew that there were people, hundreds.
That's
that
what
were
I was trying to get at. It's just the motivation was like nothing probably ever seen before around here for something like that.
Yeah, for this community, I think it was unique. There tends to be kind of I don't want to disparage anyone particularly, but a low-grade apathy that, I've lived here long enough that to know that exists, but to see this, it shook everyone, I think, so deeply that apathy was gone. So moving forward with the coalition, if you want to talk about some goals you have, or if you feel like you've made progress, or what the state of the coalition is right now.
Do you remember one of our first projects beyond the meeting at Wilson? So the meeting at Wilson, we were validated, one, in that we knew that there were other people in the community who felt the same way that we did, and they came out. And second, one of our goals from that meeting was to show that we weren't all alone. and that was inspiring and motivating. And then shortly thereafter, we wanted to do a public demonstration.
Yes.
Right? You want to talk about
our Unity rally downtown? We joked that I don't think there's been this many people downtown since the last time Chambersburg was burnt down, but we came in peace and we had a good time. It was just groups of folks, again, gathering. We had some voter registration tables. We had some live music, and we just gave our goal, I think, was to show the community, especially our more marginalized members. We were seeing at that time increased incidents of racism and other really alarming things here locally. So our goal was just to kind of make a presence known downtown. Hey, you're not alone. We're here. We see you, and come join us.
And we wanted to deliver positive messaging, and we did. It was, by the way, what the Women's March was all about. 600,000 people together, and very few, if any, incidences of contention, and I think that continued in our Unity gathering.
And I'm glad you brought that up about the positivity that was on display, because I think that was important. And I was there that day, And I remember a lot of honks, positive honks and waves from people. And I thought, that's exactly what we need. And so I think your coalition did a really wonderful thing that day in not making an explicitly anti-message, but a pro-message.
And conversations. There were so many different positive conversations that just happened that day amongst people who were very different from one another. And that was how we feel this coalition was started and one of our goals as we continue forward.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a Muslim man who had a sign up, said, "I'm a Muslim man, ask me a question."
Give me a hug.
I definitely had some questions for him. I had asked him questions about the caliphate and, the split, and he had answers for me, and it was extremely informative. So that was a great day. Moving forward, what's up next? What do we have planned?
Right. So throughout the year, we worked with other organizations and organizing other educational events. We were fortunate that Wilson College has kind of been our host site, and they've been a wonderful community partner throughout the year where we've had speakers and lectures. We had brought in the League of Women Voters to have a forum on redistricting, and shortly thereafter, that inspired other folks in the community to create a local chapter of Fair Districts PA.
And we could probably stop for a second to say what success they enjoyed. That is really hard to even comprehend that it happened. Despite the Republicans' best efforts and ongoing efforts to impeach Pennsylvania State Supreme Court justices. I mean, there's no links to they won't go. So sorry to interrupt, but
no,
go on.
Okay. Yeah. And so a common theme throughout the year was looking at social justice and racial issues. A couple of other programs, immigration. A couple of other programs that we had over the last few months of 2017 included free showings of 13th, which was a documentary film about the 13th Amendment and basically institutionalized racism within our prison system. And that was an awakening, I think, for a lot of people, even people like me who I find myself fairly informed and educated. But when you go and see it in your face, and then have a facilitated community discussion, it wakens you up even more and kind of like makes you realize this is something that really needs to be worked on in a more intentional way that hasn't been. Apparently it hasn't been.
Absolutely.
And so while we were doing these programs throughout the summer and into the fall of last year, more tensions in the national landscape, national context, racial tensions were heightening. And then Charlottesville happened. And then locally, we were all like messaging each other, and a lot of more exchanges about personal anecdotes, people that we know who had experienced more overt racism and hate. And so that just, I think, directed us toward our more pointed mission, right, of social justice. Like we were getting there throughout the year, knowing that was going to be a focus, social justice and equality. So, I think the 2017 really helped get us focused on what we want to do going forward. So, to answer the question that you asked like 5 or 10 minutes ago, we're formalizing as a 501c3 nonprofit.
Great.
And we're actually having our first organization official board meeting this weekend. And so we're going to be real.
Yeah.
And we're proud to be a program of your 501c3.
And we're grateful that you're a program. So obviously education and outreach and programming will continue to be a focus of the coalition. And in addition, diversity and inclusion training, which we facilitate. Do you want to talk about that, Melissa?
Well, before you go, I want to address this term, social justice. It's kind of amorphous. Does anyone want to kind of address that in a more kind of granular way to help people understand what that means?
Yeah, I mean, the definition justice, to unpack that, I think we can come around this commonality that, justice means, what does it look like for people to be treated equally with fairness, regardless of a lot of different characteristics or distinctions that make up a person. So when we're talking about social justices, we're talking about people being treated fairly across gender lines, across color lines, across lines of religion, cultural lines, so that nothing separates a human from being treated like a human being. And so, a lot of different issues come up when we look at that, like as mentioned, racial inequality, immigration issues, LGBTQ rights. So those are the things that we feel passionate about. And I almost feel like even just, hearing Noelle, it's been like almost sparks, like lighting too, right? Connecting with different people who have already been doing things along the lines of seeing social justice happen in our community, as well as creating new partnerships, creating new ideas like this podcast. There's just been sparks that have been coming out of this sense of fear and potential hopelessness, because there really isn't. There really are people in this community who have a heart to see people being treated equally, and that's what I think our heartbeat is here.
And this might be a good time to mention the FCCP isn't the only organization in Franklin County, and so we have, though, made a concerted effort, and so have they, to cross reference and publicize each other's events. I don't know, Noelle, if you want to mention a couple of those organizations, but we are not alone in that either.
Right. And so other organizations that evolved at the same time we did, one being the Concerned Citizens of Franklin County, another being Community Uniting, and another being the Franklin County Equality Center. So it's been really inspiring, I guess, to see all these different groups coming together, because we all want to try and make change, right? Yeah.
So are you in regular contact with these groups? Are you working as partnerships? I mean, how is this playing out with everybody? Is everybody's vision aligned, or?
I think that there are areas where our visions align, but that partnership is a good overlap. That, Brenda, thank you. That's a good word. Overlap. In those areas, we work together, and we also explore other areas on our own and projects on our own. But areas where we have overlapping interests, we're able to facilitate one another as community partners and try to really affect change here locally. I think our biggest encouragement is that what we hope to see out of this is greater conversation, looking to see people refrain from turning inward and reaching outward. We want to facilitate, change by way of compromise. And that's something that seems to be kind of just by the wayside lately. Everyone is so divisive and they're so steadfast that we hope to find middle ground and affect change.
So how do you convert conversation into action, into change? How is that done?
Well, I think the Concerned Citizens have a focus on that, wouldn't you say, Noelle?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all do it in different ways, right? We're an example of that. How do you convert a conversation into action? And it's really pulling together different groups' talents and resources and aligning and leveraging.
The conversation, in a setting where there's some guidelines and so folks are encouraged to speak up and also encouraged not to demean, another voice. I think I've seen that in other organizations, and I think we proceed in that way as well.
And I think a key component to conversation is listening, right? So listening to the voices that maybe aren't being heard in a community, listening to the voices that we might not agree with, to find where that common ground is, or to find where the lost voices are that deserve to be heard, and having action taken because of that.
And I'm sorry.
I was going to say, this may seem...
Now, I'm going to interrupt you, Natasha.
Yeah.
Before this all got started, Natasha swore she wasn't going to have anything to say.
I know. Well, and this may seem passé, but it's really think about the rhetoric. You got to be about it. You can't just talk about it. You got to be about it. So at the end of the day, do we really have time to be doing this? No, but we're doing it. I mean, we make time, and you can too. You know, find something that you're passionate about, whether it's healthcare, environmental issues, racial issues, and do one thing, whether it's have a conversation, whether that be with your neighbor or with your representative. You know, that's all you have to do to take that next step is from conversation. You know, you're saying, Pete, how do you affect change? You just do it.
Show up at a Chambersburg Borough Council.
There you go. There, yes, yeah. Get involved, vote. Be an informed constituent.
Mm-hmm. Do we want to discuss the last meeting? It might be interesting because in terms of affecting change and social justice, we witnessed it. Maybe not the fulfillment, the nadir of it, but we saw a huge leap forward in that borough vote. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, you're talking about the resolution. I sat on borough council until the end of last year. The issue came to council by one of our council members. He had heard from a constituent that they wanted to address an ordinance that would protect LGBT in Chambersburg because the state law doesn't go that far. But the state law does say that local municipalities can go above and beyond what the state law says. And
we're talking about discrimination in housing and in jobs and just basic equal treatment under the law.
Right, yes. Right. So I think the borough at that time was apprehensive to take that on as a local ordinance, and what we were offered instead was this resolution of support to amend the state law to include LGBT. And so we'll take that, but I think that there's still work to be done, and I think that it'll come back at some point to get the local ordinance.
But it was nice to see that vote.
It was.
I don't know who was there. We were there, but it was really nice to see the vote go so heavily in favor of it.
Yeah.
So here we are. Is it March? It's March 2018. Let's talk about some of the upcoming events, what you're excited about, where people need to go to find you, just all the details.
Right. So a theme that we've just talked about over the last few minutes is common ground and having conversations. And so one of our new programs, which launches on March 10th, is a free speaker series called Common Grounds. And it'll be located at the Quail Free Library the second Saturday of every month at 10 a.m., 10 to 12. And it will feature different speakers to talk about different topics. And so the topic on March 10th is Running for Office 101. And we're pleased to have Judy Chambers, a former borough manager and community development specialist, who will facilitate a discussion on the nuts and bolts of running for office and why it's important to run for office and how you can get engaged in local government. Yeah. The following month, you can look for all that information on our Facebook page.
Okay, and your Facebook page is?
FCC for Progress, I think.
Oh.
I mean, you can just search.
Franklin County Coalition for Progress. And we're working on a website, which will be live soonish, but isn't ready to go yet.
And how do people get involved? How can they reach out, get involved? I mean, do you have any... I mean, Natasha, you were saying just be about it.
Yeah.
Now, for some people like you, I think that's maybe a little easier. Maybe if we can address for people who, maybe like Melissa, were previously apolitical, brought out of the shadows, or however you described it. What can people do?
Sure. So if you want to get involved, or you even just want to start by having a conversation, contact us. Like Noelle said, Melissa said, search us on Facebook, Franklin County Coalition for Progress. Our email is on there. You can instant message us. You can find us at an event, and we can start a conversation about what interests you and what you might want to do in your community.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Go ahead, Melissa. Did you have something to add?
I was just going to say that's, as we move forward, that is something that we are always looking at, how we can involve more people and, broaden the net and make it easy for people to plug in the places.
Okay. I would like to wrap this up now, and I kind of want to go around and just hear what people have to say in terms of what's making you hopeful. What do you feel positive about right now? And there we go. All right. Thank goodness, because I got some blank stares there.
I, to this day, in the context of my day job, even. I'm still finding people who live in this community, and I deal with older adults who don't know we exist, think they're all alone in their homes, and when a conversation comes up, I've passed Kleenexes to them as they cry to realize they're not alone. And so, we talk about the number of people that have already stepped up and we've seen are in alignment with what we're doing here. I know there's many, many more.
Yeah, there are.
So that message needs to continue to go out. And so that makes me hopeful.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think where I'm getting a lot of my hope in these days is looking at young people, looking at the next generation coming up. I've worked with young people for the last 17 years of my life, and one of the critiques is that this upcoming generation doesn't have respect for authority, or there's this lack of, and while yes, there can be some.
I think we're giving them reason not to have respect for authority, to be honest.
But isn't that always the critique that?
Yes, that's the old man's grumble.
Yes, and
in my day.
Yeah.
That is the thing that is needed to make resisting change where resistance is needed. So even just, watching the students of Parkland just of this last 2 weeks.
I thought that would be the thing everybody went to, because for me, that's powerful.
It is.
What's going on down there. And I like their lack of respect for authority. Watching that town hall, did everyone watch the town hall where Marco Rubio got his pants dropped? I loved that. And so for me, that was inspiring.
Yeah, we need to hear their voices. And this could be another podcast topic, but there's, young people of color have lacked being heard so quickly. Regardless of, the truth of that matter, I'm glad that young people are being heard, and I do have a lot of hope in this upcoming generation.
Yeah, me as well. What about you, Noelle? Come on. All the pressure.
I'm inspired by what we've experienced and what we've built together over the last year. I think there was a lot of criticism from folks who look at people who protest, protesting doesn't do anything, right? Or they think that it doesn't do anything. And I think that we're an example of, we engaged in something big and bigger than ourselves. And then we came home and we found a way to try and make change and to continue a way to improve our community and our families. That's what I'm inspired by that.
Now, as a 501c, you can't directly support a candidate. Is that correct?
Correct. Right. So we're not a political organization in the context of advocating for politicians and endorsing politicians. We're not a PAC, right? We're not a political action committee.
Right.
We're a social organization, social justice, educational organization.
Mm-hmm. All right, great.
Pete, I think this is a good time to point out too. We have members from all political parties. We even have a handful of remorseful Trump voters that we're not, as Noelle said, at this time it may sound that we may lean to one political side, but really what we're looking for is ethics and truth and just a reckoning of, is everybody following the rules? Is everybody being treated fairly? And that's where this conversation got started.
Yeah, and to that point, the norms are out of whack.
Yes.
The things that we used to kind of see as the baseline for society, they're being challenged. I mean, we're in an age where truth itself is under siege. And so I think what you guys are doing is really important. And I think, you've taken that protest to its next step. You've taken it forward. And I want to thank you all so much for coming on the podcast, our initial podcast. Be sure to tune in. And if anybody has anything in closing you'd like to say, now's your chance. All good? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So Pete, let's let them know how they can contact the podcast.
That would be progresspod@gmail.com.
Very good. And a website still to come, just like you guys. So
the website we'll be getting that up soon. We'll get our Twitter account up soon. Facebook page, perhaps, maybe not. But yeah, stay tuned.
Yep.
Thanks for listening.